So now, as Vice President of Sales at Scarborough, I take great pride in being surrounded by a team of true industry experts. And it's my privilege to introduce you to Mr. Patrick Colgan. Patrick is a licensed customs broker, certified customs specialist, active in the Chicago Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association and the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. We are pleased to have Patrick with Scarborough. He is the director of our North region and our European trade lanes. So Patrick, turn it over to you to present a little bit of information before we get directly into the Q&A.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, and greetings from tropical Chicago. I think it's going to be about 70 degrees here today in Chicago. So I'm going to just dive back into some of the background, and then we'll get into the guts of the regulation, and then finally we'll get right into the questions and answers, because I feel that's where we're going to get the most benefit for you out of this presentation. So SOLAS was initially created in 1914. It goes back that long. And it's the SOLAS Convention is an international treaty concerning the safety of merchant ships. Now, the amendment has come on because there's been concerns, safety concerns, and these safety concerns have been created by the carriers, APL, Maersk, the likes of those folks. So at the end of the day, the amendment states that a packed container's gross mass weight must be verified prior to stowage aboard a ship. The verified gross mass. So the implementation date, as Kevin had alluded to, is July the 1st. I know a lot of you probably on this call are hoping that this date gets pushed off. However, I would not get your hopes up that that's going to happen. The Coast Guard is digging their heels in pretty strongly and want to go ahead and get this regulation put into place. So the responsibility of providing the VGM is going to be necessary from the three parties listed on the presentation there. How it's easiest for me to kind of relate to who the shipper is the party that's going to be on the carrier bill of lading. So in most cases for Scarborough's exports, I'd say 90% of our exports, Scarborough is the shipper on the carrier bill. Hence, we will be responsible to provide the carrier with the VGM. Now, if you're an exporter or an importer that does high volumes, you may have, maybe negotiating your own contracts. You are then obviously responsible to provide the VGM. If you're booking through a forwarder, that forwarder can likely, provide the VGM to the carrier on your behalf. That leaves it down to communicating the VGM, which is likely going to, vary by carrier. However, how we see it coming about is the shipping instructions that we provide now to the carrier will just be amended, and the VGM will be part of the data elements that you provide now. The VGM is necessary in advance of the cargo's loading on the vessel, and the carriers have come out and stated that they're going to want it in advance of the containers ingate into the terminal. Also, communication of the VGM is going to be have a signature required by the shipper, somebody who is duly authorized by the shipper to provide that information to the carrier. Now, the consequences for not providing the VGM are going to be no loads. Your containers are not going to get on the ship, and you're going to have port charges and so on and so forth. Now, the enforcement of that is where things get a little bit gray. The Coast Guard has pretty much come out and stated at the TPM that they want no part of enforcement of this regulation. So they're leaning on the carriers to enforce that against their customers, which is going to put them in a pretty tough position. So now I'll get on to the two methods of how you can go about verifying the gross weight. Method one is pretty straightforward. You'd have to go to a scale, get weighed when you're empty, and then go ahead and get weighed again once you're full. Now, to get the VGM that the carrier is looking for, you're going to have to do just a quick formula. You take your tare weight of your container, your cargo weight, and minus out the weight of the cab, the tractor, and the chassis. So there comes a little bit of confusion on how that's going to come up, how you're going to gain this information or gather this information. In my experience with the carriers and the truckers that I've polled across the nation, they do all have this information handy, but the timing of it is going to be the challenge, I feel. Because if you're, depending on the volume that you have many trucks all over the road across the nation, going over a scale and getting that information to your forwarder or the carrier prior to in-gating is going to be a challenge. Now, method number 2 is where you just weigh the cargo, the dunnage, any blocking and bracing that you have within there, and then you add your tearaway and provide that to the carrier. And to backtrack just a little bit, one little note there, any bulk cargo, if you have any grain shippers on here, method 1 is going to be the required method that you must use in order to get the VGM, obtain the VGM. Now, Scarborough in Chicago does load a number of consolidations to the EU and other locations throughout the world. And how we anticipate providing the VGM is weighing each piece of cargo that we receive. We currently do that now, and we will continue to do that in the future to make sure that we're in line with the regulation that's coming about.